Hi guys, welcome back to the new James Bond show with Krazy Kajeevie, with no fears, limits or substitutes. The bad boy of James Bond is back, and I'm here with my official No Time to Die review, directed by Krazy Fukunaga on a potentially $275 million budget. That's still a little bit disputed. So far, as of this review, the film's clocked up over $650 million. So it's bringing in the money. I will say on this point, this is the first James Bond film to ever be released in a time of not only potential lockdowns around the world where most have lifted, but also a horrific form of segregation where unfortunately there's so many film going audiences, and probably a lot more than the media are letting on, that cannot go and see this film. They're not allowed to because they made a medical decision for body autonomy not to stick something into their body. We all know what I'm talking about. So sadly, I know a lot of people in different countries all around the world that have not been able to go and see this film at the cinema. And I think that's really sad. And I think it's really eminent I bring that up and important, because that is going to lead to my prediction of how this film goes overall, not just box office, but with Blu-ray. So I think the Blu-ray sales will really shoot up for that reason, though they could kind of stay kind of level in a way also, because now we have, compared to back in the day when Spectre came out in 2015, of course we have so much streaming services, and it's already gone to VOD, which is video on demand in America, and I believe this week in the UK as well. So that will be really interesting. But it's a sad situation when people can't freely go and see their beloved James Bond at the cinema. So for those people, I really feel for. So what's the story of No Time to Die? Well, the story, and of course many of you out there already know about the story, so I'm not going to go into massive detail on it more than what I really need to. I want to focus on the characters, the production design, my review and thoughts of all those different facets of the film. So the story is James Bond at the beginning of the film, and guys, of course, this is completely spoilers filled. So if you haven't seen the film, don't check this video out just yet. Maybe come back late. But I'm potentially the last person on the planet to review this film anyway, so I'm sure you've all seen it by now. So James Bond and Madeline, there we see them at the very start of the film, but just prior to that, the film opens with what I think, and I'll give you more of my thoughts later, a brilliant scene in Norway where we see Madeline as a child. Then we pick up with Madeline and James Bond pretty much within a month to 3 months after Spectre finished. And Bond and Madeline are heading off to Madeira. Madeline wants James Bond to forgive Vesper and confront his past, and James Bond wants to know her secrets. Through that, a big action scene happens. James Bond believes he's betrayed by Madeline. He puts her on the train. We go to the credits. 5 years later, we find out that a project called Heracles, which is a nanobot virus weapon, which M has been involved with, has been stolen by Spectre. The plot, I don't think the plot is so much convoluted as people are saying, but there is more to pick up on Heracles, what it does, what it is throughout, with each screening, because I've seen it twice and I still want to see it again. And I'd love it on Blu-ray where I can just pause it and really listen to all the dialogue crisply and cleanly, because some of it, especially with Valdo, the Russian scientist, is a little hard to pick up, and some of Safin's dialogue, who's the villain played by Rami Malek, is a little hard to pick up at times as well. But James Bond comes back out of retirement. He teams up with Felix Leiter and a CIA agent named Ash, and Bond has to basically go and rescue this scientist. Madeline is then involved in interrogating Blofeld. Bond wants to interrogate Blofeld as well. So the whole plot revolves around that, and then of course the bad guy Safin, he comes in and he wants to steal Heracles and use it for his own means. That's basically the story, guys. It's an incredible film. It's an epic film, and all of that involved, especially with the characters that I'm going to get through, the set pieces, action, etc. All up, the film runs for 164 minutes. Now, in my first viewing, I thought that was the shortest 164 minutes I've ever sat through. And I think maybe, even though I was very tired in the first time I saw it, maybe it's because I didn't feel the weight of the film because I was so excited to see it. It's been such a long wait. It's been 6 years. And of course, with the pandemic, it's had almost a 2 year layoff to hit cinemas, and it almost feels like it's going to be in DVD around the world before it's even off the cinema here in Australia, which is almost probably going to happen. Okay, so Kerry Fukunaga directed No Time to Die. I think his direction on this, sometimes it's hard to always judge the direction between a second unit director as well on times, and of course with a James Bond film, with the producers and the ideas that they have. So with that idea, I'm going to nip on the elephant in the room, and then I'm going to discuss that later. So obviously in No Time to Die, James Bond dies. It was a prediction I had back in 2019. I said he would die. Then I got almost a borderline official leak that he would die, and I explained exactly how he would die. So I did know that then prior to me seeing the film. I had that confirmed for me, basically ruined for me. Now, I don't mind putting out predictions there. I will always do that. That's part of what I have to do here at the James Bond Show. But having it confirmed was a little bit of a downer. So when I went into the film, I had listened to everyone's reviews. I'd read everything on the film. I pretty much knew everything that was going to happen. But I cleared my mind. I went into the cinema and just said, okay, I've accepted James Bond is going to die. Let's see how they do it. Do they do it with style? Do they do it with class? And of course, everyone knows here at the James Bond Show and my previous channel, the James Bond Show with Krazy Kajeevie. If you haven't subbed there, guys, and checked it out, go to the James Bond Show with Krazy Kajeevie. This is the new channel, the new James Bond Show. But over a 2 year period there, not only did I predict what would happen, I was very outspoken against what I saw as potentially woking James Bond and bringing James Bond, as even Barbara Broccoli herself said, bringing James Bond into the Me Too era. So the alarm bells were massive. Now, ironically, in one of my favourite scenes of this James Bond film, in the pre-title sequence, there's James Bond and Madeline in the DB5, a great scene, and the camera pulls up and out and you see these big bells, and the bells go boom, 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 like really going off, old school big bells. And that is a real sign here that the bells are tolling for James Bond. Now, in that pre-title sequence also, we get to hear, which I'm going to talk individually later, we get to hear track 2 on the album, the soundtrack album called Materia by Hans Zimmer, and it basically is a reworking with part of Billie Eilish's No Time to Die song, instrumental little pieces mixed in with John Barry's We Have All the Time in the World instrumental, and that is a stunning piece. So we know the filmmaker Fukunaga is already telling us, giving us hints that this is probably the end for James Bond. Especially if you're a long-time James Bond fan like you guys are and myself, then you know that the bells are tolling for James Bond. And if you did go into the film hearing rumours and think maybe he could die but you didn't know for sure, I think there's a lot of, not even subtle, but there's a lot of hints there that the bells are tolling for James Bond. But overall, I think Fukunaga's done a really good job. I will say that as far as the action, he's directed the action in a way through his second unit director, Alexander Witt. It's been directed in a way that it fits in reality as much as possible. Now, obviously, it's a James Bond film, so there's always got to be a kind of a bit of a hyper reality, and that's when Bond films, I believe, work the best. And if you have a look at Quantum of Solace, that's probably where, you know, it works the least, because maybe it's too realistic, gritty and hardcore like a Bourne film compared to more classic 60s James Bond elements where I think this film has. However, I do think that the action set pieces are not as big and great as I wanted. Even the DB5 chase, I believe the DB5 chase It is beautiful, it is nice, but I wanted more. And I'll give you an example. When James Bond turns on the guns, the miniguns comes out of the front of the DB5, and the smoke screen, which is all fantastic and looks great, I would have just liked more there. Because I don't think... I mean, did James Bond wipe out all those villains? Because of course we see Primo who's there, we see him later on. So I would have liked a bit more there. I would have liked to see a bit more of the cars flipping, explosions, etc, etc. I think that would have been just really take it to another level, because when James Bond puts Madeline on the train, for me it was a little bit too clean. Like, hang on, now you kind of feel a bit safe enough to get out of the car and put her on the train. No, he did put her on that train very quick, and he never bought her a ticket. And at the end of that scene, of course, we get Dr. No, the little red dots and the green dots and the white dots that were from Dr. No in 1962 as it goes into the credits. So overall, I think he did a wonderful job directing, but he clearly was a director for hire for an idea to kill James Bond. Now, there's no doubt, and it is coming out to service, but even over a year and a half ago, it did come out that Danny Boyle left because he did not want to kill James Bond. Now, the media were pushing somehow, and I think this was pushed by Eon and MGM through rumours, and don't forget, they own people. Like, all they have to do is promise things, give people money, whatever, and they can own a large portion of the media. And I think media stories were absolutely manipulated to make it look like Danny Boyle left because he wanted to kill James Bond to protect the ending of this film, because they didn't want us to know that James Bond was going to die and they were going to kill him off. So there's no doubt that Cary Fukunaga went in under the premise of, yes, I'm being hired to kill James Bond off. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, we'll get to that a little bit later. So let's look at, guys, let's look at the good guys' characters. So I'm going to start with the two main ones. So James Bond and Madeline. First of all, Daniel Craig is absolutely fantastic in this film. This is my favourite performance of his. Overall, in fact, favourite performance, I loved him in Spectre. People say he checked out in Spectre and he wasn't quite there. I don't believe that at all. I thought he was more Connery-like in Spectre. This film, he's more dark and brooding, and he's more talkative. But in those talkative moments, like in Jamaica, we see a really more relaxed James Bond, a bit of a humorous James Bond, but a James Bond that doesn't have the cares of MI6 anymore, and I really like that. But Daniel Craig gives it everything, and this film has layers for him. No Time to Die has layers for James Bond. Now, equally, a lot of people think one of the weakest parts of Spectre was Léa Seydoux as Madeline. Not so much her performance, but basically the script and what she had to do in that film. In this film, they have clearly fleshed her out. Now, there's 4 or 5 different writers on this film. I would say that Phoebe Waller-Bridge has had a massive influence on the female characters. That's why they hired her, and also to bring a bit more humour to the film. Will we ever know exactly parts she did? Maybe not, maybe, I don't know. But there are scenes, and I'm not hugely familiar with her work because I'm just really not a huge fan, especially what she did in Solo, the Star Wars film. I thought that was just shocking, so not really a fan of hers. However, from what I have heard about her, interviews I've seen with her sense of humour, her style, her imprint is definitely on this script. And if it's helped Madeline, the character of Madeline, then I'm all for it. Then I think a job well done, because Madeline is so fleshed out. And this time there's more of a chemistry between her and Bond. And I will say too that Léa Seydoux looks absolutely smoking hot in this film. She looks gorgeous in this film, especially in the scene in Norway where James Bond goes to visit her. And she's wearing a little tight white top. She's just looking absolutely stunning. So let's get to Felix Leiter. So Felix is back in the film, played by Jeffrey Wright. He's fantastic. He's really good in it. I would obviously liked more of Felix, but here in No Time to Die, they choose that he does have time to die, and they kill off Felix Leiter. But it's done really, really well. I think it's done quite emotionally, and so yeah, I'm okay with him dying because what it does, some people out there and fans of the Bond films are not happy that Felix has died with James Bond in the same film, but this is the end of the Craig era. So because it's the end of the Craig era, it's kind of like and we know James Bond, dies. So it's kind of like all bets are off the table. And what it does by killing off Felix Leiter, it adds an emotional weight to the film and how James Bond continues as a character, which is a fine example of that is the way he then goes in and sees M. Now, M's got no idea that Felix has been killed. And when M gives a sarcastic comment about caring about what Felix Leiter and the CIA think, Bond comes out with a brilliant piece of dialogue where he says, well, that's good because Felix Leiter is dead. And then you see the reaction to M, and it's fantastic. And from there, the tension of that scene really, really builds. But I thought Jeffrey Wright was good. He was more loose and more likeable, I think, than he was in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. The camaraderie between Jeffrey Wright and Daniel Craig really comes out in the film as Leiter and Bond respectively. So yeah, I'm really glad they brought him back, and his death was really reminiscent of how Vesper died in Casino Royale. Like, you could almost do shot for shot the way he went in underwater. But what they did here is they gave more attention and better dialogue and more respect to the character of Felix dying than what they did, for example, with Mathis in Quantum of Solace, which I thought was really... You could explain that death to me and the reasons why and how they killed off Mathis, and I still will never accept it. And some people have put out videos heralding Quantum of Solace as a great film and trying to basically explain why it's so good. And they talk about that death, and I just don't buy it. I will never buy it. I think that was really badly done in Quantum of Solace. So guys, let's go next to, well, she's almost become the elephant in the room. Let's go to Paloma, played by Ana de Armas. Now, everyone is raving about Paloma, and they're raving about the Cuba scene. Is she hot? Is she sexy? Yes, she is. And her frock she's wearing is great, which was actually designed by an Australian designer and then passed on to Sudarat, the costume designer of No Time to Die. So, tick to Aussie designers there. I like Paloma. I thought she was great. I thought she was fun. She certainly got a lot of laughs. And overall, she's in a very James Bondian scene. But I disagree where people are saying she's the best character in the film. Or she steals the film. I disagree. Who do I think, or what do I think steals this film? I'll tell you what steals the film. What steals the film is not any one character. What steals the film is the emotion of this film, is the heart and the soul, especially backed up by a score like that in the background. That's what steals this film, and particularly the relationship between James Bond and Madeline, for me, steals this film. It's all about them. And so they really have recovered from certain things in Spectre, and I believe No Time to Die is going to make Spectre a much better film because of the decisions they made here. And they really got Madeline and James Bond, their relationship, absolutely right. They nailed it. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about Paloma, then I'm going to get into the daughter, who's another elephant in the room. But I did love Ana de Armas. I'm so glad, actually. I did wrongly predict that she would probably be killed off. And then other people said, no, Me Too era, they're not going to kill any of the women off. And that person or people were right. They didn't kill her off. And I'm glad for that. I'm glad they didn't kill her off. She was really good. She was really funny. And there was great chemistry. Obviously, Daniel Craig and Ana de Armas have worked together in Knives Out, and there was really, really good chemistry between them. I kind of didn't like, though, the way James Bond was made to look a little bit desperate. He's just met her. They go down into a room, and it's a room where she's got his tuxedo, etc., and this, he's James Bond is expecting a bonk and thinks that she's just going to bonk him. And I think it kind of, even though there was humour there, I think it cheapened James Bond like he was just some male slut and just ready to jump into bed with her. And then she dismisses him like, oh, no, like this. And it got laughs because of the character of James Bond, probably expecting most women are going to shag him. But I don't think Daniel Craig's James Bond, and I think a lot of you will agree with this, guys, Daniel Craig's James Bond has never been the shagger. So that was almost a bit out of place. That was almost like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I believe, picking on James, on the stereotype of James Bond, as though he just expects a shag. But Daniel Craig's James Bond has never just expected a shag from a chick he's met, especially in the first 60 seconds. So therefore, even though it was kind of funny and humorous, it was a little bit out of place. So there you go. I don't know. Maybe that will grow on me. But yeah, she was good. But did she steal the film? And was she as great as everyone's saying? To me, no, not really. And that's not anything against her. That's not me saying she was bad. She was... Look, this is weird because she was great for the time she was in the film. But I was just more invested in the relationship between James Bond and Madeline overall in the film. But we definitely needed this scene. We definitely needed the Cuba scenes because we needed the fun. We needed to see Spectre again, which I'm going to get more into later. So we needed that kind of frivolity. And the way the humour was done, especially with them having a drink and her being so nervous, but suddenly coming out as a kick-ass agent, was really, really good. Especially she went into the film not knowing what her role was, and it was basically just written to get her into the film. Now, I am going to talk about Mathilde. So yes, James Bond and Madeline have a daughter named Mathilde. Now, the actress that plays her, I don't know how many actresses they audition, but she was brilliant. And I'm going to talk more about her with the end of the film and the final scene of the film, but I thought she was absolutely fantastic, as was the young actress that played young Madeline in the Norway scenes. I thought she was fantastic as well. But this girl, it wasn't this typical Hollywood schmaltzy, cutesy kind of thing. They cast someone that really was believable to be the daughter of Daniel Craig and to be the daughter the daughter of James Bond, I should say, and the daughter of Madeline. So the casting on her was absolutely fantastic. I actually loved it. Look, I love the fact that originally I spoke out thinking, no, I didn't want James Bond to be a daddy and all that sort of stuff. But as I then said later on, guys, if they're doing these things, be it killing James Bond, making him a dad and all this, if it's done respectfully to the character and it's not to hijack the series, then I'm not going to have an issue with these things. So I thought having the daughter bonded their relationship. Now, also, what James Bond and Madeline having a daughter does is it cements their relationship more in Spectre. And I would say that when they first, that love scene in Spectre on the train, that is when they would have consummated Madeline. It works out perfectly within the timeline. For anyone thinking that they slept together in Materia and then the next day she's pregnant, well, don't understand the birds and the bees, but I've already done a video on that. And as we know, Madeline's clutching her stomach, especially when the closed door on her in the train, she grabs her stomach, she knows she's pregnant. Now, what is her secret? What's Madeline's secret, since we're still talking about Madeline? And Blofeld says, you know, her secret when it finds out will be the death of you. I think that was over-dramatic dialogue because the secret was she's got a child. And what she wanted to tell James Bond in the pre-title sequence was, I'm pregnant. That's what she wanted to say to Bond. And, of course, with Bond's decision, his anger, his temper, his feeling of betrayal and hurt because he hadn't dealt with the things that she wanted him to deal with, well, it cost them their relationship because, in the end, of the PGS sequence, he didn't trust her enough. Now, let's get to another elephant in the room. I was very, very critical of Larry Lunchbox, a.k.a. Lashana Lynch, taking on the role of Nobi. Now, what I was more critical anything was this being shoved to basically hijack this series. And once I found out that I knew and ran with it that James Bond was going to die, I was really pissed, thinking, well, they're now going to bring in a short-haired, tough-looking black woman to take over the role of 007. Obviously not James Bond, but 007. Now, the ending, which I'm going to get to more later, hints at the fact that that was a real potential and probably still is a real potential to happen, which, again, I'll talk about a little bit more later. But how did I find her? In short, I actually thought Nomi was really cool. She was a really cool character. I believe she needed more backstory. And for me, even though this film's 164 minutes, I think there's a lot on the editing room floor, and there's probably a bit more with her. Now, if there were scenes like reported that and came out of her mouth that she wanted to do a tampon, throwing a tampon in a bin scene, then I'm glad and that can stay on the editing room floor. But the biggest problem with fans like me and many of us that spoke out against the character and that we were really worried she was going to be woke, 100% lands on both Lashana Lynch and the marketing department of this film. And I'll give you a prime example. In the first trailer that came out, Naomi says, "If you get in my way, I'll put a bullet in your knee." The one that works. It came across so pretentious and it was cut off there. But what the trailer didn't give us, and what the film does, is the film gives us context. The trailer didn't. The context was she was there sent by M to stop the CIA, and Bond is now working with the CIA, or potentially about to work with the CIA, to get Heracles and to go to Cuba and get this scientist. So, in short, Naomi is there to stop Bond and the CIA doing that. Does she really need to go to Jamaica? Yeah, probably not. You know, when you really make sense of it, she didn't really need to go to Jamaica. Why was James Bond going to listen to her, the new 007? Why was he going to listen to M? So, you know, that's food for thought on that one. But overall, her character arc was good. And James Bond, I mean, he upped her. He beat her most of the time, especially in Cuba. And I love the line where he says, "I'm going to borrow your plane," and they take off in her plane. And then later when he arrives in Cuba, you see Naomi and Bond kind of smile. So there is, there's some really good fun. There's some good banter. And overall, I actually like her. So there you go. Now, I'm always man enough to admit I'm wrong. I'm not going to say I'm wrong here, because we were really led to believe it was going to be shockingly woke. And I still believe that in the hiatus that this film had sitting on the shelf, I believe that they've gone in and probably de-woke this film a bit, and possibly even by giving back James Bond his 007, especially you can't kill Bond and not make him 007. So I did like the scene where she relinquished the 007. And the reason Naomi did that is she now had respect for him. She actually respected him. But what happens and what made her have that respect for him was not that he was a dad, not that, Madeline was his missus and all that. It was the fact he showed her respect. He showed her a lot of respect. He actually called her 007 several times, and when she was calm and respectful, he treated her respectful. Now, one little scene, a bit of dialogue that's out of place is when they're in the Q plane, which I call the Switchblade subplane. When they're in that, he says, "Have you ever flown one of these before?" Their relationship has patched up. She's already given him the 007 number back by then. But still, she's like, nope. And I don't think she needed to be that, I don't think they needed to continue that kind of London street attitude with her. It just kind of cheapened her character a little bit. When she's classy, when she's nice, and the chip on her shoulder goes a bit, she's, I just find her a more likeable character. And I did enjoy her going with Bond to Safranzo as well. So yeah, she was okay. She wasn't bad, as long as they don't hijack the series with her. Moneypenny, Q, yep, they're in it. They're serviceable. Q's really fun. He gets some good scenes. Yep, and of course, another elephant. There's a whole bunch of elephants in this film. Of course, Q's gay, and they give it a little line where Q says he's coming over for dinner, and I absolutely love the bit. And Matty Muckle, my good mate, picked up this bit where he reminded me of this bit where Bond grabs a wine. It's so funny. Q's got this, he's got his boyfriend or whatever coming over, and he's got wine and that set up, and Bond grabs the wine and he just starts pouring wine and giving it to Moneypenny and makes himself at home. And I think little bits like that are really, really great. And I think, well, it's obvious this will be the last time we see Daniel Craig with Ben Whishaw, Naomi Harris, as the Scooby-Doo bunch. And it was really done well. It was really done cool. And the line where James Bond says, Q, they come with hair now, when he's talking about Q's cat, was hysterical. And both screenings I've been in, everyone laughed at that line. Moneypenny's good. She's all right. I am going to touch on her a little bit more at the end of this review for a very specific reason. I thought she was good. She was serviceable. And yeah, she's definitely got a nice chemistry. And I like the fact that her character cared about James Bond, even after all these years he's been in retirement. So I liked what they did there. With M and Bond, their relationship, I think, is really brilliant. It's really intense, especially where James Bond doesn't give a shit about M anymore. And he says, has this desk gotten bigger or have you gotten smaller? So I love their scene. It was hyped up to me, like it was really intense and really full on. I didn't think it was as much as probably it could have been. I would have liked to have just turned that up a degree if I was directing it, but overall it was really good, and the performances were absolutely solid. So yeah, a great scene. Actually, one of my favourite scenes in the film was that scene. Excuse the pets, guys. They're having a bit of fun. Sorry about the interruption there, guys. The pets were just having a little bit too much fun. Okay, so let's get on to the villain. So the main villain of the film is Safin, played by Rami Malek. I actually love this character. Now, I'm not going to take long harping on it. I love the character. I'm a big defender of this character. I think Rami Malek was a classic big Bond villain in this film. And he was hurt. He was this really hurting character. And so deeply affected by his family being wiped out by Mr. White. Now, his introduction in the pre-title sequence in Norway is a classic. I'm glad they put this in the PTS. Could they have put it? Some people are saying, you know, I heard that one person said, oh, they could have put it as a flashback in the scene where Madeline and Safin have that meeting in her office later. I don't agree with that. I think it needed to be there for the basis of the film, especially in the pre-title sequence. They've chosen the right place because we need to understand when Bond and Madeline are together in Materia, and he's saying, well, you know, you need to tell me all your secrets. She hasn't told him about any of this. So therefore, for the audience to see that first right from the get-go, not only does it give weight to the secret she holds, it gives weight to Safin. It gives weight to who Safin is and what he means to her. So that is why it's so important that they put that at the start of the film. So I disagree with people that don't believe that should be there. I think they made the right decision. Absolutely. And the way that's directed too, it's so scary and so spooky, the way he just pops up at the window. And also the costume design, the clothes they've gone for, and the no mask is really, really good. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Yeah, I love Safin. Now, some people are saying he doesn't really have the backstory. Why does he want to kill everyone in the world? And look, granted, I think we do need more information there. I think what's happened here, and I have talked about this, guys, in my videos, but I'm going to address it one more time. There is no doubt in my mind he was Dr. No. Now, someone said to me in the comments the other day of one of my videos, where does he get called Doctor? Because he actually does get called Doctor, and I saw the scene yesterday. One of the henchmen say it's basically where you find him called Doctor is where Safin goes in under the floor. Bond tries to shoot Safin. He goes under the floor. He's got Mathilde. When you next see Safin, he's walking along. He's all calm and cool. And one of his henchmen says, Doctor, the shipment has arrived. So he calls him Doctor. Nowhere in the film, other than that line, is he called Doctor. Okay? And of course, we've got the big Ken Adams set. He bends down. He's talking to Mathilde. And you see the big, you know, the crate dome thing behind his head, exactly like the set where Professor Dent goes and picks up the spider in Dr. No. So I have no doubt he is Dr. No, and I think there's probably context and everything there is missing that proves more why he's doing what he's doing. Now, when you think about it, in the classic Dr. No, what happened where Dr. No is talking to Bond? He's pissed off and he's angry, and he's pissed, and he joined Spectre because the East didn't want his services, the West didn't want his services. So he was pissed off and angry, and that kind of gave him motivation. If Rami Malek was playing Dr. No, and he had a scene like that where he was expressing why he was pissed off and why he was angry, then maybe they've needed to cut that out to get rid of the whole Dr. No thing. I don't know why they would cut out Dr. No. I find it a real pity because I think that we needed, be it a Spectre villain or a former Spectre villain, and that would make more sense why his family, you know, Dr. No's family is involved with Spectre and why he's going against them, because it would make sense if Dr. No's father worked for Spectre. I think that would have been a nice tie-in. Other than that, yeah, we don't get a massive amount of motivation of why he's doing what he's doing. So I think that criticism is fair. However, I think the performance of Malek is so much better than what people are letting on. And I feel that as we see the film more and more, that you will see he's a classic villain. Because Rami Malek is so involved with his character, how he's performing the character. He's really intense. He's really deep. Especially in the scene where he's with Madeline where he goes and visits her and he shows her the mask, he is creepy as shit. And the person he's talking about, the person, you know, you love, of course the audience doesn't know that Mathilde exists. And that's exactly who Safin is talking about. He's talking about the person you love. And when you see Rami Malek, he's like, he puts his head away. He goes, oh, that's very sad, Mathilde. Like, I feel bad for you. And he puts his head away. And then he, you know, pulls his head around again. He looks at her and he says, but really? Something like, oh, really? He knows she's lying. He knows she's lying. And he's condescending and he's creepy and he's manipulative. And I absolutely love him as Safin. And you know what? A lot of people are saying we could have had more of him. Now, also something I've picked out, guys, in the trailer, there are pieces in the original trailer that are not in the film. One of them, and I'm going to get back to Safin in a second, but one of them is where Bond's walking along. Remember we all famously saw in that Boom Shot Disc video clip, we saw behind the scenes and things of what was happening in Jamaica, and Bond's walking along. There's one scene where he's got the gun out like that. We never see that. Also where he's walking along with that spear fish gun thing. We never see that in the film. And another scene we never see is it would appear during the helicopter chase and the Land Rover chase, we see Safin in the trailers in the helicopter. That didn't make the final film. So there's so much taken out. Now we know he was in the helicopter in that scene because he's in that scene anyway. And he captures Madeline and Mathilde. So we know he's there. So there's a lot of stuff that's, you know, been cut out of this film. And I actually feel the film needed to be longer. I would have happily accepted a 3-hour film if it gave more backstory to his character, revealed him as Dr. No, and just gave us a bit more of everything, especially even Nomi. I'm happy to see more Nomi as long as it serves the film. Also, remember, Daniel Craig hurt his ankle. Apparently when he was performing an action scene outside his little home in Jamaica, he was running on the pier there. We never saw that either. So I think there's quite a few missing scenes from this film. Now, Blofeld. Okay. I love Blofeld in this film. He's creepy. He's weird. I love the introduction of him, the way he comes up in that long shot. Not quite there with, you know, the silver introduction, but really creepy, really freaky, really awesome. I liked him. Could we have had more? Could they have done so much more with him? Yeah, they could, guys. Could they have done a different story? Could they have had Blofeld escape from prison? Would that have been too cliche, though? Maybe he escapes, but they can go in and do the operation they did, and they can get Heracles, but they don't go into Belmarsh. But then again, is Spectre try and take on Belmarsh? As good as Spectre is, I don't know if they would have pulled that off. So a lot of people are thinking that Blofeld should have been in the film more, should have been the overall villain, and Safin should have been his henchman or a co-baddie or something. Yeah, maybe possibly, but how do you do that and get him out of prison without being cliche? Because of who Blofeld is and how famous he is to us James Bond fans, then yes, I believe overall, from Spectre to the film, they got things wrong. But the fact is, Kerry Fukunaga and the writing team, well, they were in a corner. They were in a corner with how Spectre ended by Blofeld being captured. He shouldn't have been, in short, he shouldn't have been captured in Spectre. That would have, or right at the end of Spectre, maybe a credit sequence, he gets out, he escapes, the convoy he's in gets attacked or something. Maybe they could have had that as a pre-title sequence. They could have almost shown right at the end of Spectre, like they could have shown at the start of No Time to Die, being from the end of Spectre, just after Bond and Madeline drove off or something. They could have shown maybe, or no, just prior to that, Blofeld being, rescued by Spectre, and then we know at the end of Spectre that Blofeld's out there. But then again, that's all hindsight, isn't it, guys? That's hindsight. Now, what did I think of Logan Ash, played by Billy Magnussen? I loved him, and it's really interesting because he was really hidden in the marketing material and the trailers. You didn't see a peep of him. I think in one TV spot, might have been the Super Bowl TV spot, you see him in the background. Perfectly cast. I don't know who Billy Magnussen is prior to this film. Never heard of him. Thought he was great. I love the line where James Bond came out and said to Felix, what's with the Book of Mormon in there? That was a hysterical line. And you notice that when it's revealed that Ash is a bad guy, his whole persona changes. So really good performance there by Billy Magnussen. And the way he dies, yeah, it's a throwback, I get it, 2, James Bond killing Locke, kicking the car, and this time he crushes Billy's character, Ash, with the car. And it was really good. Now, something I want to touch on, guys. A lot of people have got this wrong. Now, as I said, I'm open and honest, and I have listened to all the channels, reviews, read reviews, seen reviews, etc. It's amazing how much stuff people have got wrong out there, and I don't know, I don't want to be arrogant or up myself, but they just kind of don't get certain things. Okay, so let me explain something about Felix. One channel in particular said that, which I won't name, said that because we don't see Felix since Quantum of Solace, he hasn't really earned the status of where James Bond says, I had a brother once, his name was Felix Leiter, and believe that Felix hasn't earned that. Guys, why did he say that? It's not because they had this big, long brotherly relationship, though that's definitely hinted at in this film. And they spend a bit more time with Felix in this film, with the way they're playing the games and having the drinks and stuff like that. Though it would have been good if there was a bit more, particularly if maybe Felix was in the Cuba scenes. And that's what I think is missing. The Paloma scene, I really would have loved a hysterical, this is going to sound dirty, 3-way between Bond, Paloma and Felix with radio pieces and action. I think that would have been a lot better, and I think that would have should have happened. But where Bond says, I had a brother once, remember the classic line in Casino Royale where Felix finally introduces himself to Bond and he says, your brother from Langley. That's what Bond's talking about when he says, I had a brother. He was always known as his brother from Langley. That's part of that. So it's not like they were, you know, bosom buddies, etc., etc. He was his friend, but he was also his brother within that community, within that spy community. So that's what that's like. I thought I'd just bring that to the table. Okay, who else? Okay, Voldo, I think he was serviceable, played by David Dencik. Probably a little bit annoying, but serviceable. Kind of reminded me of a weird version of Boris Grishenko from GoldenEye. He was in the film a lot more than I thought. I didn't like his death. I thought his death probably could have been a lot better. You know, where Lashana Lynch says, or Nobi says, do you know what time it is? It's time for you to die. And I know others have a bit of an issue with that, and I do too. I thought it was a little bit weak. I would have liked him maybe to attack her, maybe for him to actually have a vial that's going to erase her, because he says that line about, I could, you know, erase your whole race of people. And maybe he has a vial for her, and he tries to attack her with it, and then she kills him in a brutal way. I would have enjoyed that a lot more. Now, one of my all-time favourite henchmen, and I would have loved him even in this film more, I love Primo. I mean, how many people are set up so iconically, so quickly, other than when we see Jaws with his teeth, than Primo is with his Cyclops, with his bionic eye. The whole idea, whoever came up with the idea of the bionic eye, and especially how it was used in Cuba on the pillow, and Blofeld is communicating with Spectre through that bionic eye, is freaking awesome. That is a great idea, and it's very James Bond. I absolutely love it. Now, one thing I want to touch on too, I want to go back to the Cuba scene here for a moment. One thing I'm disappointed in was this, and an idea I had for the film is with the Spectre Cuba party, I believe that's where they should have just gone full on fan service. And that's where Dr. Vogel, who she's in it, she was in Spectre, I believe she should have, like, they could have come in with invitations, right? And we see the invitations, or we see other people talking to them, even if it was done more subtly with subtitles, and we see that she is Rosa Klepp, and that we see that the black guy who was Inspector, I don't know if he was back here, I haven't spotted him. If anyone has, please let me know in the comments below. But the black guy who had a speaking role at the big Spectre table, Inspector, please let me know if he's in the film. But I would have loved him to come back and being revealed as Mr. Big or Dr. Kananga. I would have liked one of them in there to be Red Grant, maybe even Billy Magnuson. Maybe he could have been Red Grant. You know, I wanted to feel and see Spectre. And then they all get killed, they all get wiped out, and Spectre's gone. And then Blofeld dies. So yeah, did it do the best with Spectre? No, it didn't. Does that overall hurt the way, my overall feeling of this film, which I'm going to come to later? No, it doesn't overall. But I think there's so much more that could have been done. I think we should have had Largo there. Rosa Klebb, etc. should have had the villains there. And maybe even Blofeld's Pussycat could have been at the party as well. I just imagine the eye sitting up there on the pillow and one of the baddies is carrying around a pillow and Blofeld's cat is on the pillow. That would have been a pisser. That would have been really funny. And as a director, creative, that's what I would have done. Anyway, guys. So, okay, so Primo, really liked him. I thought his death was brilliant. Bond uses the EMP watch, his eye blows out, and Daniel Craig's line in this is so good where he says, Q, I showed someone your EMP watch. It blew their mind. That was so good. It was really, really funny. Now, something I want to talk about, the vehicles and the production of design. I loved the Switchblade plane, the Q plane. I really wish we saw that more. And my expectations were to see that in a big battle. I wanted a massive battle in the sky with that, or even underwater. We only really get one shot of it underwater. And if they had an underwater battle or something, it would have been so much better. But I know production time or production cost time, etc., etc. But yeah, I wanted to see more of that because I loved it. DB5 really well used this time. I touched on that earlier. I would have liked to see a bit more on that. The magnets were also a gadget where Vardo was kidnapped, chucked down this well thing, and he was free falling until he had these magnets on him, and there were magnets on the wall. I thought that was really great, clever invention. The bionic eyes I've touched on, I think it was brilliant. Now here, I'm going to make a prediction, guys, on Mark Tilsley's production design. I think the production design is not only going to be nominated for an Oscar. Obviously, I haven't seen what everyone else is putting up there, what's going to be nominated, but I believe that his production design could be nominated and win an Academy Award. If you look at the sets, just individual photos of the sets, I think they are brilliant, especially what they did with recreating Cuba on the Pinewood backlot was incredible. Now, while I'm talking about sets, I do want to say one of my big disappointments in this film. When you look at still photos of James Bond's Jamaica retreat, his home, it is stunning, it's gorgeous. I'm really disappointed that we didn't get more Jamaica in the film, and I'm really disappointed we did not get to see that beautiful set design properly in the daylight. You see Bond go in there, but the shots are all kind of close. The only time you really get to see more on the kind of wide angles is at night time. So there's not much light coming in, there's not much lights coming in, and it's where Nomi comes in, and that's a great line by Daniel Craig where she takes the wig off and he says, "That's not the first thing I thought you were going to be taking off." That is brilliant, and all Phoebe Waller-Bridge, so credit where credit's due. But yeah, for me, I'm really disappointed I didn't get to see his home in the day, full proper in the daylight. And I believe we should have had him sleeping on the couch, had him lying in there, hanging out, kind of like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon, where he's in his trailer more, just where you see him at home more. And I wanted to see James Bond more in retirement. I wanted to see him down in Jamaica, maybe like Strangways and Dr. No, where he's playing cards or backgammon or something, where he's shopping down the local, and I bet you all this footage was filmed and probably on the cutting room floor, where he was shopping for his, groceries and stuff, and people knew him and called him by James, and he knew the local by name because he'd been there for 5 years. So I wanted more of that, to see that and to show what he was leaving to go on this adventure with Felix, and we didn't get enough of that, so that was really disappointing for me. But Mark Tilsley, wow, especially the Safin lair is incredible. Obviously very Ken Adam inspired. I loved the production design in this film, from Q's apartment, which was really great, to the Madeline's house in Norway was absolutely fantastic as well. The score by Hans Zimmer, got it playing there, guys. Wow, I love it. I really do love this score. Now, my review's a bit late on the score. It will be coming in the next day or two. I'm a little bit delayed, but that full soundtrack review will be coming soon. My particular favourite pieces are, of course, Matera, track 2. I do love the Town Square music where Bond's in the DB5, and once he starts the guns on that it kind of comes in the music. Now that's used in Cuba, and it's used later also in the big finale battle, and I actually didn't like that. I love the music, but I didn't like the fact it was reused. The Cuba score, once Paloma's going batshit crazy, kicking ass, throwing guns, and you got that real Cuba mix, I love that. That is great. You didn't need to bring that music that's so iconic when the Aston Martin's doing the donuts, shooting the guns on the smoke screen. That music should have been left there, not reused in the film. That's just my opinion on that, because then I think it would have been classic for that scene, and I don't think it suited the Cuba scene. And I believe that Thomas Newman will get an Oscar nomination as well for the score. I really believe that, and hopefully he wins. Why not? Okay, so guys, I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty of the film. I'm going to get to what you all want to hear me talk about. James Bond dying. And my overall thoughts of the film. Okay, I love this film. Yes, I was the harshest critic during pre-production or during production of this film, because of things that were coming out and how bad the marketing was, and then how actors were talking, especially Lashana Lynch saying a toddler could go and play James Bond and everyone would go and see it. So I was really against that. But overall, they needed to kill James Bond. I think they've made the right decision, and I think a lot of people have this wrong because it's more the older generation that have an issue with it. This is not Dr. No. This is not Goldfinger, guys. It's not Live and Let Die. It's not Connery to Brosnan. We all signed on with Casino Royale. We signed on, when we paid our ticket to go and see it, we signed on to a Daniel Craig era. This was not the Bond that our daddies grew up on. This was a completely different Bond. He was more empathetic. He was more selfless. He was less into the women. And for good or bad, that's just the way it was. But one thing you can't deny, the Daniel Craig James Bond, even though maybe not in looks, has been more Ian Fleming in character and character development. So with that, him dying, which was also pretty much pulled from the... which novel was it? From You Only Live Twice, of course, and even in that novel, he's got a child. It was made to look like he died, and of course he came back in The Man with the Golden Gun, etc., and tried to kill M in the novels. But there's so much Fleming here. There's so much Fleming in this James Bond. It oozes Ian Fleming from the novels. So them killing him off, okay, and I really want to nail this, guys. Really want to talk to you about this. James Bond didn't commit suicide, okay? He could not survive that. First of all, he'd been shot just below the heart. He'd been shot back here, like pretty much near the kidneys. How he even had that fight with Safin is beyond me and shows his strength and toughness. And that's why they let him go, by still being a macho man and still being, you know, he went out like a pimp, like a boss. He went out awesome. But he was dying anyway. Now, one thing I want to touch on with the nanobots, they're all over him. And people are going, oh, he could have got off the island. They could have found a cure. No. And the filmmakers, through the direction of Fukunaga and the writing, especially the dialogue between Q and M, it was set up so clearly. They were eternal. You could not get rid of that. Once he's off that island, Madeline and Mathilde will end up dead. You're thinking, well, how? Only he was scratched with it. And what if he stays away with her? Guys, have you heard of the saying, and I want you to really listen to me, there's only 6 degrees of separation between you and everyone on the planet. If Bond was to see Moneypenny, M, anyone he comes into contact with, those bugs go on them, right? They could go on a local Jamaican person. Then there's a tourist Bond could go back to his village in Jamaica. A tourist comes along, those bug goes onto them. Then that person goes to Norway, etc., etc. Those bugs carry, it's a virus. So eventually, those bugs, just like the coronavirus, will travel all across the earth. And once they travel across the earth and make their way to England or Norway or whatever, one day they will come in contact with Mathilde, because the virus is eternal. That is why Bond knew, A, I'm dying, B, Safin can come up here and shut the doors again if I try and leave. Now, Safin did close those doors. I was corrected. I think it was Havapai Bill Gates that told me that one. And you're right, buddy. He did close those doors. So Bond had to stay there for those doors. Now, the final scene where Bond's on the phone between Madeline and he says, you have all the time in the world now. It was so gorgeous and beautifully done. Now, I'm going to go more into detail when I do videos during the week. I'm going to be going at every part. So I will be doing a special video on just the finale of the film. But when the missiles are raining down and you see that shot, you've got Madeline here and the camera's kind of underneath her, and she looks up and you see the missiles coming over, and mixed in with Hans Zimmer's stunning score, the piece of music, I think it's called Final Descent. Oh my goodness. I was in tears. Guys, let go of Roger Moore. Let go of Pierce Brosnan. Let go of that and see this film for what it is, a sacrificial lamb who died with dignity. He already loved Mathilde. He loved Madeline. He knew from the get-go that was his daughter. He knew in his heart that was his daughter. And I loved the fact he actually has a daughter in this film. I loved it because it brought the relationship so strong. And the final scene when those missiles came down and obliterated him was absolutely, you could hear a pin drop in the cinema. It was beautiful. And I've looked around and seen people crying, and I spoke to a woman next to me yesterday and she was in tears afterwards as well. It was a beautiful final fitting to James Bond. And guys, there's Muppets out there that don't understand the 4 words, James Bond will return. And people are going, oh, he must have survived, or how is he going to return? No, he's not returning as Daniel Craig's James Bond. He's going to return as the character, as in a new actor will come in and play him in a new series. That's how they're going to do it, guys. So I thought it was a fitting end. I thought it was really great. Now, when we go to the last 2 final scenes, we've got M with the glass and he clanks the glass. And we finish on that. I would have liked the camera to hold on the glass just a bit more. And you know what? I think the glass there, I think it should have been a vodka martini, shaken not stirred. It looked like it was a scotch or something. But also, if you remember in the scene with Bond and M makes himself, like when they meet in his office and it's all fiery in there, it's, you know, they're having that fight. M gets himself a drink. He doesn't get Bond a drink, which is really disrespectful, especially in British culture. You have a drink, you offer someone else a drink. So at the end of the film, he's got the same drink, you know, that kind of whiskey or whatever. He's got that. But I think it should have been a vodka martini there. Maybe people would have thought it was a little cliche or whatever. I would have loved that. And I would have liked to have seen tears from Moneypenny. I just think we needed to see her a little bit more sad. Now, the final line, which I said I would talk about later, the final scene where I hope they don't hijack the series, where M says, right, back to work. That is a clear indication of plans potentially to push this series forward with all of them, and now a Black 00 taking over. It doesn't matter, black, white, doesn't matter, whatever, female, whatever, someone taking over that franchise. Race has got nothing to do with it. It's just about they brought Black Lives Matter into James Bond, not me as a James Bond fan and not you guys as James Bond fans. So let's look at the very final scene. We've got, if you notice, guys, so in the PTS where Bond and Madeline are in the DB5, that's the exact same mountaintop and tunnel. Okay? That's the same mountaintop and tunnel. At the end of the film, now they're in the Vantage. I actually would have loved it to be the DB5. I think it should have been the DB5. I know it makes sense story-wise for it to be the Vantage because the Vantage was left just outside Madeline's home in Norway. But I just think it would have been classic and romantic, and then in the film, Bond's gone, and so's the DB5. And the DB5 goes down the tunnel and never to be seen again. I just think retire the DB5. But the scene, the final scene where Madeline is there with her daughter in the car, the casting of this little girl is incredible. And what I love, she's not cutesy and schmaltzy here. Madeline says, Mathilde? And their relationship, this scene is played out so realistically. And she's like, yes. And then people are coming out going, oh, it's corny, it's cheesy. No, guys. What the problem is, your heart's too cold. Open up your heart, guys. Let the emotion come out. And she says, I'm going to tell you a story of a man named Bond. And she doesn't even go Bond. She doesn't say Bond loudly or clearly. Almost needs subtitles because it's done so realistically. And then Mathilde's face is just blank. She's got poker face. She's just really blank. She's just like this. And then after she says, James Bond, they cut back to Mathilde. and the beautiful little poker face, and she's got little cauliflower ears, a little face, just this beautiful smile. And it's like, for you to kill off James Bond, this is what we finish with. I'm in. I'm in. You've got me. This gorgeous, beautiful little girl and her mum, and then they drive off into the tunnel. We cut out and they drive off into the tunnel, and We Have All the Time in the World comes on. Now, I challenge anyone out there that's criticising the use of this music and trying to say, oh, they're creatively bankrupt. They are not creatively bankrupt. I challenge anyone to honestly tell me what would have been a more beautiful, moving piece of music, because there's nothing anyone could create, even Hans Zimmer, could create that would be as good as Louis Armstrong's and John Barry's We Have All the Time in the World on right then and there. And you know what the biggest enemies of James Bond are sometimes? Us, the fans. We want fan service, then we don't want fan service. We're sick of silly Brosnan Die Another Day, we want serious Bond. We get serious Bond, we're upset, and we want silly Bond. The producers are so often damned if they do and damned if they don't. They gave us a brave, classic, stunning Bond film with heart and soul. And I absolutely love this film. And out of 5 stars, even though things could be tweaked, could be better, here and there, whatever. But out of 5 stars, I'm giving it 5. This is a 5-star James Bond film. It is my favourite Daniel Craig James Bond film. And I haven't ranked it out of all the other Bond films together, but I guarantee you guys, you'll probably never ever see it out of my top 3. This is one of the best James Bond films ever made. It's the best Daniel Craig James Bond film ever made. And it is just a heartfelt, moving, beautiful experience. And I think, I'll tell you one thing, guys. When people saw Spectre, they liked it. They were cool with it. Then they hated it. People saw No Time to Die, and most people liked it, but they hated the ending. Then they went back second time and third time, and then they really liked it. Then they loved it. And that's what's going to happen with No Time to Die. People are going to, the fans are going to love this film. I've been Krazy Kajeevie. Keep on bonding, guys. And say hi to your mum for me. And just remember, we have all the time in the world.